Morning. Priscilla and I committed to doing a series over the summer that takes us into the Hebrew scripture texts, the assigned Old Testament readings. So we've been in the cycle of Jacob so far this month. We're also trying to weave in some different art forms. Today was music. I will say I thought Priscilla was trying to get herself downstairs because she got me stuck with this text today. I'm just going to tell you up front, I sort of did my own thing with it instead of trying to go with our theme. We'll see how this goes. This text, again, it keeps us in the cycle of Jacob stories. We've already seen that Jacob's story has kind of a soap opera characteristic to it. And that is just intensified in this reading. It's very messy. In fact, if we had not committed to this series, I would have skipped this story because there is so much here that I do not like even reading out loud. And yet, somehow, it is the story of God's people, warts and all. It starts with Jacob visiting relatives. His mom, he'd betrayed his brother, and so his mom sent him off to another place to visit relatives in hopes of, number one, saving his life, but also, number two, finding a wife. Stay alive, get married. Those are the two goals. So he goes to his mother's relatives. And this is where it starts. Genesis 29, starting at verse 15. When Jacob had been with them for a month, Laban said, the relative, "Why do you work for me without wages, just because we are related? Tell me your worth, and I'll hire you." Now, Laban had two daughters. The older one was Leah. The younger one was Rachel. Leah was nearsighted. It might also mean her eyes were lovely. The Hebrew term is apparently kind of ambiguous, but most of the translators go with Leah was nearsighted, but Rachel was lovely and graceful. Your favorite character. And Jacob was in love with her. He said, "I will work for 7 years for the hand of your daughter, Rachel." Laban answered, "I would rather that she marry you than give her hand to another. I accept this offer." So Jacob worked for 7 years for the right to marry Rachel, but to him it felt as if it were a few days. Story of romantic love, right? That was how much he loved Rachel. When 7 years were up, he said to Laban, "I have worked for you for 7 years. Give me my wife, that I may go into her." So Laban brought together all the local people for a wedding feast. That night, however, he brought his daughter Leah to Jacob, and Jacob went into her. Laban also gave Leah his maid Zilpah to be her maid. In the morning, Jacob woke, and it was Leah beside him. Order of operations. There's something here. Order of operations. Hello, I know it's dark, but hello, let's talk. Jacob said to Laban, "What is this you have done to me? Didn't I work for you for 7 years for Rachel's hand? Why have you deceived me?" Laban answered, "It is not our custom here to let the younger child marry first. Finish this wedding celebration week with the elder, and I will let you marry the younger for another 7 years. Work." Jacob agreed to finish the wedding week with Leah. When the week was finished, Laban allowed Rachel and Jacob to marry. And somehow, the lectionary leaves off the last two verses, but leaving them off doesn't make any of this better. So, Laban gave his maid Bilhah to his daughter Rachel to be her maid. So Jacob went into Rachel also, and he loved Rachel more than Leah. He served Laban for another 7 years. There are a lot of elements to this story. A clear moral is not one of them. There is betrayal. There's deception. There's the women in one's family being treated as if they're property without their own decision-making power. And then there's the non-related women in the household being treated as the property of property. And then if we keep going, we'd see what is by now a familiar pattern of playing favorites with kids that just and spouses, that just gets transferred from one generation down to the next in an ongoing unhealthy cycle of family dynamics. The story has its obvious aspects of interpersonal betrayal. For pretty much everyone involved, except maybe for Laban, life turns out differently than they would have planned for themselves. There's also the slightly less obvious, maybe pretty obvious to us though, aspect of cultural customs and social structures letting people down and betraying them and leading them to act in harmful ways. The deception of the daughters, the handing over of human property. Last week, I asked you to send in any stories about how you handle situations of betrayal and disappointment. Nobody really told me stories of betrayal, so I feel off the hook on that one. I also asked for music that you turn to in the times when you feel betrayed or deceived or your life has just turned out differently than you expected. This is where we're trying to weave in the aspect of the arts. One suggestion I got was Billy Joel's River of Dreams. Michelle, who's unable to be here this morning, but she sent me a number of songs, which I'll just say, if you have to put together a playlist, check in with Michelle Hatchell. I got one person who reminded me that the Psalms in the Bible are a whole book of songs that express the entire range of human emotions and experience, and what a gift that is to have in Scripture, this full range of expression. I'm going to play you a left field choice, which means one, it's something that I've wanted to play in church for a long time, and two, I'm just forcing it into this morning. So it's a left field one. It's from Nico Case's most recent album, Neon Gray, Midnight Green. It's called Little Gears. The connection is probably not going to be obvious at first, but stick with me. The song is a meditation that grows out of her experience of watching a spider spin a web. And so I'll just invite us to sit and hear this song.
Spider build a web. It's something I'd never done before. I assumed it was a 3-day event, as intricate as they are, as fragile as they are. But she finished it in less than an hour. I felt cheated by how easy it was. No mistakes, no missteps. Born yesterday with the gears of an atomic clock. Is she nothing but a program like love? A smell on the air that tells us when to go. Why can't she stay? That miracle, a story to explain everything away. Little spider.
I love that Karen pointed straight up to the spider in our stained glass. And if I'd planned all of this ahead of time, Karen and Melinda, I could have had you come up with a spider dance to go along with the song. I know there's a lot of words at points there. It's hard to track all of them. But I hope you got the gist of it. She starts. No, okay, well, I'll walk you through the main points there. You can look for the lyrics on Google later. She starts with a minor disappointment. Maybe it even felt like a small betrayal. Spider webs are so artistic, so intricate, so complex. She assumed that they took a long time to create, maybe 3 days. So she felt a little let down when she saw a spider in the act of building its web, and it was done in less than an hour. I felt cheated by how easy it was, she said. Then she started to wonder if the spider and its intricate ability is nothing more than a complicated bit of programming. Do we recognize this level of thought about how the world works and even about how human beings work? Just complicated computer programs, essentially. And then her thoughts spiraled out. Just a program, this little spider that was born yesterday and finished this in under an hour with no mistakes. Is it just a computer program like love? Something just inborn that kicks in and tells us what to do, which leads her to the real betrayal. Why do people have to be so special all the time? So above it all? She's naming and gesturing towards the ways that we betray ourselves by imagining that we are separate from all of the earth. We've thought of it as just something to study and explain away, as she says at the end, which leads us to explain ourselves away. We've reduced it to something to exploit, which has left us abusing it. And in the process, we've also betrayed and diminished ourselves. This meditation leads her to a place of resolve. I'll try not to explain everything away, little spider. And her realization starts with a small betrayal. That web, it was so easy to build. I feel so cheated. I thought I was watching the construction of a cathedral. It leads her to the large betrayal, which is we've lost our sense of place in the created world. We've explained everything away, including ourselves. So when she realizes that, her resolve is root herself to earth and also to cast her lot with those who are vulnerable, including the little spider. A very different context. Alexander Podrobinek was betrayed by his own nation. He was a Russian citizen who exposed the wrongdoing of his government. In 1977, he smuggled a book manuscript out of the Soviet Union that detailed how the nation's psychiatric hospitals were full of people who didn't actually need psychiatric treatment, but who were being kept there because they were political dissidents. For his troubles, he became a political prisoner. Over the course of 8 years, the Soviet government transferred him from one remote prison to the next, trying to break him, trying to get him to confess to some kind of crime. They sent him to prisons that were far away from anything, where the weather in the winter would get down to 50 degrees below zero. They put him in solitary confinement. Always, he refused to answer any questions when they came to interrogate him. These betrayals did not lead him to a place of vengeance. He was inspired. He saw Baptist ministers and Adventist ministers whose religion was also against the law, political prisoners who remained peaceful. And he said, I noticed that God always punishes those we couldn't punish. Moreover, much harder and more keenly than we could have. Maybe we ought to entrust this matter to God always. But I find myself most moved by his description of one of those cells where he was held in solitary confinement. There was a hole at the base of a wall, and then a little mouse would come out and scamper around and go back in. And Podrabinek named his little visitor Mishka Mouse. When it was meal time, he would take a little crumb of bread and put it down in front of the hole. And he said the mouse, Mishka Mouse, would poke his head out, sniff at the bread, pick it up and start chewing. And he says he would start to speak to the mouse, who a lot of the times he was reciting it poetry. And he said the mouse just stayed there and listened to him attentively. And he says Mishka was a grateful listener. He listened to it all and never criticized. In the midst of betrayal upon betrayal from a government that was breaking its own laws by holding him in prison, which perhaps we can connect that to our present age. In the midst of all this, Podrabinek drew on the unfailing support of fellow dissidents, the constant love of his wife, who sometimes smuggled in extra food for him. But the story of Mishka Mouse also says to me that one way he kept grounded in his own humanity was to remember and practice his connection to the natural world. He found company in the other creature that would find its way into his cell. Sometimes the natural world yields its secrets as well. A few years ago, Greta Binford was hiking the Columbia River Gorge in Oregon. She's an evolutionary biologist. On her hike, she found a spider, back to spiders now, that looked very familiar. It looked like it was part of a distinctive family of spiders called trogloraptors, which hunt other spiders. The weird thing about it, where she found it, was that there's only one known species of that family of spiders, and they lived 350 miles away from where she was hiking. So she started studying it. She got some of her students to start studying and analyzing it. And sure enough, she had stumbled on a previously unknown species of spider, which meant that she would have the privilege of bestowing its scientific name. Except that one of her students had a different suggestion. Reach out to the local tribes to see if they had any suggestions. So they found a connection in Donella Miller, who is another biologist, but also a registered member of the Yakama Nation. She connected them with Anthony Washines, who is another Yakama elder who grew up speaking the indigenous language. So he came up with the name Trogloraptor, which was the family of spider, Tulishpun. Tulishpun is a Sahaptin word that means cave hunter, honoring the spider's role as a hunter. This story might have just ended there if Donella Miller had not made a joke about how the spider needed a naming ceremony because it had been given a native name. And the more she thought about it, the more appropriate that seemed. And she said that in a naming ceremony, you're introducing yourself to the land and to our people so that you'll be recognized. So earlier in June, just last month, a handful of scientists and a few dozen members of the Yakama Nation gathered at the trailhead where that first spider was found. Anthony Washines, the elder, honored the scientists who had found the spider and the tribes who have cared for the land and the spider itself. He led them in a traditional naming song and a recitation of the name. And Greta Binford, the biologist, and some other locals had gathered a few of the spiders to have them there so they could receive their names, and then they returned them back to their caves. For Washines, the naming ceremony was sort of like coming back full circle from a historic betrayal. The spider remained part of the community of the land, which is a phrase I just resonate with so deeply. The community of the land, the whole community that sustained it. The spider remained part of the community of the land even when the Yakama people were not. Well, Sheena said, we were literally herded to a reservation up in the high desert plateau, which was not our land. But he, the spider, stayed here and remained. He still took care of this land. I just love that story so much. I had to find a way to share it. This is probably not the favorite sermon of anyone who is freaked out by spiders or mice. I'm okay with that. Maybe there are some threads we can pull from this. Anyway, we've got a scriptural story that shows us how human beings can cheat each other, treat each other as property, and have it all blessed by social norms and customs. We've got historic stories that show us some of the same in the world that we know or can remember. We've got music that gives us a glimpse of how to wrestle with and reframe some of these things. In all of it, there's a reminder that we are created. We are creatures. And finding our grounding in and our connection with the rest of the natural world might just be the best way to persevere when the human mess lets us down. Remember that we are a part of the community of the land, and ground ourselves there, root ourselves there. That is the starting place for building solidarity with what and who are truly vulnerable. And leave room for mystery, because the spirit that moves through and in and around the human mess of it all might be the greatest mystery of all and the greatest force propelling us into what should be. This is God's good news. Amen.